I'm a huge advocate for having the longest possible exercise period when you grant an option.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some rules around this, but it's different for ISO and NSO, I think, as
Yeah.
well. So it's probably worth us talking about this. So from my understanding, and I've been doing this for years now, but
Yeah.
every country's a bit different. But there's only really two reasons, in my opinion, or there's potentially three, but two main ones why an employer or contractor would want to exercise their options. The first one is that they want to participate in an exit event, and you can only really participate in an exit event if you've converted from an option to a stock or a share, and then
Yep.
you get your liquidity as part of that
Yep.
transaction. The second one is you want to participate in dividends, and option holders don't get dividends. You have to be a
Yep.
stock, shareholder, stockholders to get your dividend. And then the third one is if you want to vote, because normally an option holder wouldn't have any voting rights. But if you are a shareholder, then you do get your voting rights. And the third one, I think, is not that important because the amount of vote you have is normally so tiny, you're not
Yeah.
going to influence any vote anyway. So it's really to get access to your cash, which is what you want out of your stock option plan, you need to exercise. So what I always say to founders is you want to exercise at the point of the exit, or unless the
Mm-hmm.
dividend is significant, because quite often you've got this big tax bill to pay to
Mm-hmm.
get your dividend, and that may create like a pretty serious issue for you, where the tax bill is larger than the dividend. So, what are your thoughts on that? Trying to align exercise to exit and the
Mm-hmm.
tax payments around ISO and NSO at that exercise point.
Yeah, most startups design their equity plan so that it's only exercisable on a change control sale of the company, and that kind of makes sense for the employee too, because you think about it. Okay, if I'm an employee of a startup and I exercise this option, okay, now I'm a shareholder. I own shares, but it's an illiquid asset. Like I can't go and sell these shares on the open market. It's not publicly traded stock, and the stock that I receive is subject to transfer restrictions. So I can't just go to my neighbors, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, I've got these shares of this X company. Will you pay me $20 for it?" You can't do that because these are non-publicly traded shares, and you're going to be subject to a transfer restriction agreement when you exercise. So, you have this piece of paper that is worth something, but you can never really recognize it until a good transfer event happens. And in the startup world, the real transfer event is the sale of the company. So that's why that's one of the probably the primary reason I would say most startups design these plans so that the options only exercisable on a change of control. And again, it makes sense for both parties because you got founders that don't want to have 50 different shareholders to kind of respond to, invite to their annual meeting and everything. And then
Get
you
them to
also got
sign
the
every single
owner.
document. You got to go around the
Yeah,
whole world.
yeah. And then you got to worry about, okay, do I have to give financial disclosures to this shareholder that owns like one share out of the 1,000 shares or 10,000 shares?
Yeah,
It's just cleaner,
yeah, it's
honestly,
a
to
lot cleaner.
to have it
And
exercisable on a change of control. And in NSO, when you're talking about exercise periods, you got to be mindful of state law, and your plan design. But generally, you can have a long of an exercise period as you want, versus in ISO. And in ISO, it has a bunch of restrictions. Like, for example, you can't have longer than 10 years for an exercise period. If someone quits and they're no longer an employee, they have 90 days, 3 months to exercise, or they forfeit the options. Versus, with an NSO, you could have it that people keep their options and they just stay out there while they're not working for the company. So it's a
which
lot
I
more
think is
flexibility with an NSO.
I think is critical personally. I mean, everyone's going to have a different opinion, and I'm still learning. But you work for a company for several years, and you earn options via vesting, and that's part of your remuneration sometimes. But then you get to the end, and you have to pay your own cash out to exercise them, and it's so hard to save cash, and you might need it for house
Mm.
deposit, or your kids college, and then you have to take it and put it into the company that you just worked for and earned options. I don't
Mhm.
understand that from an asset allocation perspective
Yeah.
and a risk management perspective as a founder anyway. So I don't really get that. I think it's tough on the employee to have to do that, especially if there's a big gap between there could be a reasonable size exercise payment, and then plus there could be a tax component to that as well. Or did we say that
Mhm.
was, yeah, there could be a tax component. That was only on the NSO. So at least in that case, there isn't a tax component. So
Yeah.
that's just the exercise payment.